Hey everybody, this is Michelle.
And this is Julie coming to you from Seattle, the Emerald City. And on this beautiful day, Michelle and I are really excited to bring a special guest to us.
We are excited.
Yeah, I would love to introduce all of you to Amelia. Amelia is my son's girlfriend and a really bright gal. I love spending time with her, and she's actually pretty hilarious, and even more so hilarious, keeps my son in line. So love her to death.
Good woman keeps the man in line. That's
right,
for sure.
That's right. So we brought Amelia on today because she has definitely some ideas about different topics and things that she thought would be relevant. And we felt it would be really important to bring Amelia on with her perspective because her age group is different than ours. And with her experiences, I think it kind of helps us to bring things full circle in regard to friendships, because we know them from your age group. And then, of course, we know them from our age group. And I think things definitely have changed and evolved to some degree. So with that, Amelia, I would love to hand the microphone over to you and have you give us a little bit of a rundown on yourself and this topic and what you want to chat about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. In terms of my background, so you mentioned age groups a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to round up and say 29 because I'm going to be 29 next month. Born and raised in Seattle, went to college locally, so have been around these parts my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really excited about talking about this specifically. I know it was one that I think I had suggested to you, just because this is a very transitional time, I think, for a lot of people. And so going through a lot of changes when it comes to friendship, have experienced a lot of different things, I think, in a relatively short amount of time from that standpoint. And I grew up as a very shy, introverted kid, still am.
That's
although
what you
I think
were
I'm
saying.
better at hiding it now. I'd like to think I'm better anyway.
We have to grow up, don't we? And we got to get over some of those things and just,
We do. And you learn to present differently, but that's still very much a part of who I am. So all the questions I think that we're going to kind of dig into today are frankly questions that I wanted to get your opinion on.
Wonderful.
So I can offer my own perspective, but excited to hear your experience as well.
So your shyness, I know when we very first met, we had talked about how shy you were and how introverted you were, but you were pretty introverted, like more than I had anticipated. Do you think that made a big difference on how you made friends when you were little?
Absolutely. I think in general, the friendships that I've made that have lasted in particular were people pursuing me, and not necessarily in an overt way. I mean, if you think about like elementary school, just somebody coming up to you on the playground, I never would have been that girl. I was not going to go approach somebody else. And so being in a position now in adulthood where those opportunities don't come up very often, waiting in the wings for somebody to come and approach you isn't an option as much as it was then.
Definitely not as realistic.
Yeah. So it was hard for me to connect with people unless they really forced it on me.
I know you have a sister.
I do.
Yeah. Michelle is a few. How many? 5?
I have 4 sisters.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
5 girls. Yeah. Can you imagine the bathroom in that household?
It wasn't that long ago for me that we were sharing both a bedroom and a bathroom.
Oh,
and
my
I can
goodness.
only imagine. But yes, I do. I have a younger sister who's 3 years younger. Could not be more different from me in a lot of ways. She is wildly extroverted. So it's been interesting to see, since she's lagging a few years behind too, how she's navigated these things. And it's very different, I think,
I
between
wonder
the
if
two of
that's
us.
part of being the young. Is she the youngest?
She's the youngest.
Because I'm the youngest, and that's me. I'm like way more out there than my sisters. So
That tends to be the case. Not always.
Yeah.
I would say from what little I know, Julie, about you and your sister, it seems more of the opposite. So it's not super rigid, but I would say we fall into those stereotypical categories for sure of eldest and youngest.
So with her growing up, you were watching her probably easily making friendships or easily being out with other people as you guys got a little bit older.
She just craved it in a way that I didn't. I mean, if you think about kind of the root of what being an introvert versus an extrovert is, it's how do you recharge? And for me, that means being alone in a lot of cases. And for her, that's not only being social, but being social in a large group of people, which was just something that I never really understood. But she navigated that beautifully, again, because it was important to her. And I think she sought that out. But I always had a smaller group of friends, maybe a couple that I was very close to and never really understood how to run in a big pack like that.
Nor did you really want to, it sounds like.
Nor did I really want to.
Do you find, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you find you and your sister, do you respect those differences? Did it ever create challenges at all?
There was a misunderstanding just in how we operated that we never really had a chance to talk about. I think now that we've bridged the age gap as we've gotten older, we've been able to have those conversations, and there absolutely is respect for those things. I think if anything, I was always envious of her and the way that she carried herself. And again, that ability to navigate those social situations that I just didn't have. I would say the same was probably not true in the reverse. I think she just didn't really understand why I wasn't drawn into those situations.
Or probably encouraging you to get more into those social situations, which you weren't comfortable with.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, I mean, again, there have been a lot of changes just given my age, right? Going through your 20s.
Sure.
Lots of things happen. For me personally, I went through a fairly large transition in my life around the age of 25. And so I had an opportunity to rebrand in whatever way I wanted to. I had kind of isolated myself for a long time and came out of that and was excited to figure out who I was or who I wanted to be. And tried different things on. And one of those things was being that girl that I always wanted to be, kind of more of a sorority party girl, you know, again, a few years too late at that point.
That's okay. We kind of did that like just this in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
No,
Lots to talk about there that we could go into another time. But it was something that I always aspired to be. I sort of tried that on for size and it didn't work. I think I'm not wired that way. And that's okay. It's taken me a long time to get on board with that idea. But
I love that you tried though, because it probably was always something in your mind, and that word rebrand yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth exploring all the options. I mean, again, it wasn't necessarily ideal timing, although I think you can rebrand at any time. But I made a lot of mistakes. I wish I had gone through those growing pains at 15 instead of 25, but learned a lot. And yeah, there are certain immovable forces at play there in terms of, again, you know, I'm not wired that way, and learning to love myself, knowing that is a work in progress.
That's the hard part, especially when you're a kid, you don't necessarily identify those things. So getting into your early adulthood, I don't know that that's always a time that people are able to identify it either. So that's really great that you did. So I bring up your sister because you were just the two of you. And usually your sisters, as you guys know, are the ones that you're spending the most time with when you're little. They help form, you know, a lot of your personality traits and your pecking order, if you will, in your household. And that is your first experience probably with female friendship that's similar to your age. So dial forward from there. What was your first really impactful female friendship that you can remember?
So I've been blessed to have one of my best friends in my life for almost my entire life. Our moms actually became best friends, and I'm a year older than this person.
Okay.
So my mom had me as a toddler. This adorable family moved in 2 doors down, and my mom saw that this woman was pregnant and just forced a friendship on her in a way that I love, because she's also an introvert. So she would go knock on the door and say,
Your mom's an introvert?
No, her friend.
Your mom is not an introvert.
No. She is not. She is not. Which is also, you know, in terms of just finding acceptance for those things.
Yep.
Most people in my family are not. So I'm a little bit of the black sheep from that standpoint. But anyway, she, you know, was knocking on this woman's door, had hand-me-down clothes, just was so desperate, I think, for that connection with a new young mom, because I was my mom's first, as was this woman's. And so my still to this day best friend was born just about a year later. So I've had her in my life for 27 going on 28 years.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, friendships
Really
that
remarkable.
long, when you think about it, because I am blessed to have a really long-standing friendship like that, as you know, there's nothing like it. There's definitely nothing like it. Even as you kind of go through life, I've found that your friendships will come and go depending upon what's happening in your life or what's happening in that other person's life. But there's one person that just remains maybe constant. And there's no judgment. They've got your back no matter what. I mean, it's a really cool feeling to have. So, and they're there, when you're off doing your own thing and everything. So did you live next door to each other for a long time, or did you guys part ways when you were kids and just stay in touch, or what?
Well, what's funny is we both come from divorced households. And so her parents had split up prior to mine. They had moved to another neighborhood in Seattle. My parents split up, moved to that same neighborhood, two doors down.
No way.
Again. So we leapfrogged and followed each other. And truly, I don't think it was intentional. It just worked out that way, whether it was for the good school district or whatever. And geographically, we were always down the street. I mean, by a matter of maybe 2 houses at most, for all the way through high school.
Wow.
And then parted ways for college. And to your point, you're living your own life. There are all these things that come up. And now I've grown to appreciate that friendship so much in a way that I wasn't able to recognize or took for granted when I was younger. And we've been able to have really great conversations about that, just the value of all of that historical knowledge. I could pick up the phone and breathe a certain way, and she knows what's going on immediately. I don't have to explain anything. But we could also go 6 months without speaking. And that's also totally fine. If I were to pick up the phone, we'd just pick back up exactly where we left off. And that's really special and hard to find.
Yeah, it is.
I have a friend like that.
And it's usually only when you talk to people, I think you find your one. One or maybe two if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But it's hard to bridge all that geographical distance, the time. So many things change. So I would not say that my friendship with her is indicative of how this typically goes, but I'm very grateful for it.
That's cool. So was she accepting of your other friendships that came along?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We were able to be very independent in a way that I've actually never thought about until I'm talking through it right now. But neither of us never got jealous of any other friend groups. We knew going to different schools, even though we lived very close to each other, that was just par for the course. There was no expectation that we necessarily assimilate into either person's group, which was great because that can also get to be a little messy sometimes, especially when you're young and immature. So we were able to, I think, hold space for the fact that we were living separate lives, and that was totally fine.
Well, you guys could each bring, stuff back to each other that neither one was going to be aware of. If there was a circumstance that was happening that you needed an ear for, she wasn't necessarily privileged to that because she wasn't a part of that same friend group. That makes sense.
Yeah, which does make it a lot easier to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
Because I think especially between groups of women, when you start to have entanglements, they can bleed into one another and influence, or there is influence there among the different members of that friend group. So to have us be separate.
Do you think that's different for women than it is for men? The entanglements, the friend groups?
I think
the fallout, the tea.
I talked to my guy about this morning. That's why I'm smiling. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because my boyfriend is in a large friend group that he's had for quite some time. So you would think that there would have been more fluctuations from that standpoint in terms of people leaving or entering the group, and they have been so solid.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, when there's conflict, they say something or they don't, and then they move on, and that's the end of it. It's not...
They don't harbor resentment or...
They don't harbor resentment. I mean, to be fair, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I don't think that there's a whole lot of depth or vulnerability when there is conflict. So there's not much to work through from that standpoint.
That's what I'm saying from a guy's okay, guys,
which is not to make it gendered.
No, but
it is kind of true when you think about it.
So you're talking about this.
Yeah.
I totally see this especially with my youngest son, because he had a pretty solid, he still does, solid group of friends. And it's that way. There's conflict, but they get over it and move on. It's like not this deep rooted harboring of ill will towards anybody.
Yeah.
So,
and I've never seen people gang up on anyone else in terms of if there is a conflict between two, it's not going to involve the other 8 just for the sake of round numbers if we're talking about a group of 10. So they really keep things pretty simple, and they're also afforded that history too. So they've built up goodwill with each other, this bank time. And so if something comes up, then they just revert back to the closeness that they had or whatever it is. I mean, I suppose I shouldn't speak on something that I'm not directly involved in.
They just go
but
back to
that's my
playing video
perception.
games together, okay?
Pretty much. Pretty much. It's kind of remarkable how quickly they rebound, which isn't to say I don't want to write off the fact that there may still be feelings there, but they don't have a conversation about it or hang on to it in the same way.
In the same way, yeah. So if you were thinking back in the, like through college and through high school, and as you've kind of gotten into this transition into adulthood, have there been friends that you have come across that you've gotten into deep friendships with that you've determined maybe you need to move on from?
I would say, so I'll give a little bit of context because
Okay.
I think this is important in terms of my perspective. So I was in a romantic relationship for 9 years. So from age 16 to 25, very formative, pivotal
years.
Yeah. It was very codependent. I was super naive, didn't know what love was supposed to look like. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I just got completely sucked into this relationship at that point and things weren't going well. And I ended up effectively isolating myself and just only spending my time with this person. I went off to college and actually chose to live with him. I never even lived in the dorms or did the sorority thing. And so I was so caught up in that I lost a lot of the friendships that I had previously and was not able to open myself up to new opportunities, I guess, put it that way.
New friendships.
New friendships, yeah. So I really have had to start over just in the last few years. And I think typically, like I had a friendship heartbreak in high school so a long time ago where I had to let that go. But it took a long time. I think for me, something I'm working on is I don't always know when to let go. I'll hang on for far too long. So a lot of the friendships that I have are newer and I'm keeping an eye out for some of the same patterns that came up with that friendship that ended right around the end of high school. But I haven't had to do that in a long time, luckily.
So it's about boundaries. Are you saying that you didn't have boundaries before and so you're establishing more boundaries with your friendships now?
Trying to. I think communication, we talk about it all the time in romantic relationships, how critical that is in terms of coexisting with someone. And I've tried to apply a lot of those same principles to my female friendships as well. And some of that translates into setting boundaries, obviously. But again, because I am shy and introverted, there have been certain things that I've figured out along the way. And luckily, I've had people that have stuck by me while I figure it out.
Right.
But to be able to articulate things, like one of my best friends currently, I've known since 5th grade.
Okay.
She actually moved on from me and let me go for a little bit because I wasn't being a true friend to her and I didn't recognize it at the time. And I will say from a friendship standpoint too, which we can talk a little bit more about later if it comes up, but it's never too late to reach back out to somebody. I think there's always an opening to make things right. And we did. And I ended up approaching her and I realized I'd never explained what was going on. And I just said, I have a lot of social anxiety. I've figured out what the word introvert even means. And I want to kind of explain what that looks like. But there was some frustration on her end because she would invite me to all these things and she wanted to include me. And I was always saying no because I couldn't be in this big party full of strangers or those kinds of things. And so we had a really great conversation about it and we're able to communicate about it. And I just said, listen, it means the world to me when you invite me. And I would love it if you kept doing that because sometimes I might feel like it. I might have a good day and feel bold and, put myself out there. But if I don't, it doesn't mean I love you any less. It's just not a situation that I'm particularly comfortable with. And every time we'll follow up and maybe find another way to see you. We'll go grab coffee or we'll do something. And I mean, it's a very simple concept, I guess. I mean, she already kind of...
But it was not discussed.
But it wasn't discussed. Yeah. And so to just put it on the table of like, hey, this is what works for me, hoping that we can find our way to something that is sustainable for both of us.
Right.
And to this day, I mean, that was so long ago. And she still invites me to everything with no expectation. And when I do show up, she is so excited that I'm there. It's like a surprise.
She understands it, that it's a big thing that you would choose to go do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it means a lot to her. And so, I do try to show up when I can. And if I don't think I can show up as my best self, then I won't. And it's just not a big deal. We're able to move past it and she doesn't take it personally. I'm not upset because at that point, again, she had let me go and she stopped inviting me. So there are all these, micro interactions that sort of lend themselves to sometimes someone lets you go slowly over time.
Yeah.
You just stop getting invited or whatever it is. And all it took was one conversation. And we found our way
Have
back.
you had friends like that, Michelle? Where you just like they've come into your life and you've made the decision that maybe that friendship has run its course?
I think, have I? Are you asking if I have? I think that there's a purpose for every friendship, whether they've come and gone. Some of them are just temporary visitors in our life.
Right.
And I think that I'm able to look back on some and see that part of it, that they served a purpose. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, I understand.
It's like a meaningful, whatever is going on in your life at that time. And I'm thinking of one in particular. It got to be where, when I would spend time with this person, I wasn't feeling very good about myself because of maybe things that we were doing or things that that person was doing that I didn't really agree with, or that didn't make me feel good that we were out doing that or whatever. And it just made me reevaluate how I was spending my time.
Right.
And the depth of what that friendship was. It was
or what it could potentially be.
Or what it could, bring me down.
Right.
So, And I just, we still talk.
Sure.
We're still cordial. She doesn't live very close anymore. But when I do see her, we're friends. But it's just not somebody that I continue to choose to spend a lot of my productive time with.
Okay.
So there have been those. And I think we talked a little bit in intimacy, how you have your circle and then there's the inner circle.
Right.
So, and I think there's a different level of understanding and a feeling of value between those two circles.
Right. Well, the inner circle has definitely more insight and probably much less judgment, and it's more unconditional is what I would say.
Yeah.
But I was curious about that because I'm thinking back to friendships that I had when I was, closer to your age, maybe a little bit younger even, and not really realizing at the time. But like Michelle said, I was friends with people who didn't necessarily share the same values.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although at the time I may not have really understood that because I wasn't looking at it that way. I was, maybe just looking at it as, hey, this person's cool. I'm going to go hang out with them, But then they start doing things or getting involved in things that become who you are. It's like you are really like the top 6 people that and hang out with. It's like they're kind of a reflection of you, is what I've always understood. And so when I see the people that are in my life, I want to make sure that I'm a true reflection for them too, or that they're proud to be my friend, just like I'm proud to be their friend. And I've got them, I've got their back, whatever the case may be. But when you're younger, I don't know that people necessarily get into that much depth with it or have had the time necessarily to develop that and understand where it's coming from,
It's interesting, all the crossovers, as you're saying all these things, it's true in a romantic relationship too, with, whatever that is. And, because you want your partner to be proud of who you are and you're a reflection, really you're an extension of who they are. So a lot of similarities.
And I also think too, there are so many signals, especially I would say maybe this is catered more towards people my age or in their 20s who just haven't had the experience with seeing people come and go, or, they're clinging on to friendships that no longer serve them but don't know how to move on. There are small things, even if there's nothing egregious going on in terms of outward behavior that you don't agree with, or conversations about politics or values or something core to who you are that causes conflict. Because to your point, I don't know that you necessarily go there.
Right.
As a younger person, but even just paying attention to, like, in your body, how do you feel when you leave an interaction with that person? Do you have a pit in your stomach? Are you drained and exhausted because you've been trying to be somebody that you're not for the sake of getting this person's approval?
Right.
And I think if you start to lend credibility to your gut a little bit and pay attention to yourself, you'll get the information that you need over time to be able to make that judgment call. It's not, unfortunately, I think always as easy in terms of letting someone go as having a big blow up fight or, some major event that makes it clear which way you should lean. But I think if you don't feel like you're best, most authentic self, and you're not proud of what you're doing, like you were saying, or what you're saying. I mean, I think unfortunately there's a lot of nastiness that can happen in terms of gossiping or putting other women down. And I certainly, even in the last couple of years, have gotten on that bandwagon for the sake of fitting in with new people and chiming in with my own commentary. And then I get in the car and go home and just think to myself, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Why did I say those things? I don't feel that way about that person, and that's not who I want to be. So just, I would say to anybody who's maybe wondering about those things, just pay attention to how you feel.
Your gut never steers you wrong.
It never does, and we ignore it all the time.
Yep. So true.
So funny that you should say that, because I'm probably the worst at it. You know, you always want to give people the benefit of the doubt, or at least I always have wanted to. I've gotten less and less that way, I think, as I've gotten older. But where, like, my friendships, I mean, I consider myself to be a ride or die friend. If I am your friend, I got you. That's the way it is. And, you know, I have my inner circle of people, and then I've got an outer circle of people who, you know, I feel the same way about. It's like if they are wanting to be my friend. Like, for example, there's a gal that we're not really close. I know her. She's a friend of a friend, but she needed me today. And I'm like, I got you, you know, because it's like, she needed someone to be in her life that would be able to say yes and do what she needed to do. And I'm happy to help. And so, you know, those are the kinds of friends that I want to have too, that will have my back when I need them to, or just be available if, you know, I'm in trouble, or I need someone to talk to or whatever, and not feel like my inner thoughts are going to be they're going to betray me and share it with other people or whatever.
That's part of the core of who you are and what you put out into the universe.
Right.
By your behavior and how you treat others, because that's totally you. You do that for so many.
I'm so generous.
You are.
No, this is a joke. This is a joke.
No, I would
no, my mom says that, but she doesn't really mean generous. She means something else completely different. Oh, that's hilarious.
I would second that. You definitely are the person I think most people would call if they were in trouble, regardless of what that looks like. And I also think too, I mean, despite all the things that I just said about paying attention to your gut, and maybe there are certain things that misalign in terms of the inner circle and the outer circle. Moving someone from your inner circle to your outer circle is also okay. You don't necessarily have to let someone go if there are misalignments. And I think just being able to acknowledge, you know, okay, the girl that you want to go to the bar with maybe isn't the one that's going to hold you while you're crying because you're in a fight with your mom. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, just setting reasonable expectations and set that person up to succeed as well. Because if you can't recognize that and separate those two things and limit your exposure to going out to the bar, then you're just going to be frustrated and resentful that person isn't maybe reciprocating in the way that you would show up for them.
Right.
But maybe that's not the end of the world. And you can rely on those inner circle close friends for those things. And as long as those values aren't being compromised and you're not putting a version of yourself out that you're not happy with when you're with that person, there is, I think, a middle ground sometimes to be able to just put them in a different category for a while or for the rest of your friendship.
Because the expectations are different for your outer circle than they are going to be really for your inner circle, I would say. It's
they
like
should be.
You think about like that scenario of going out, like you're going out with your friend, right? Just the two of you going out, and you're going to go grab a drink and whatever. And they take off with some guy and leave you. Now, what kind of a friend is that? You know, or the fact that they're super drunk, they become drunk and that you let them leave with somebody. It's like, what kind of a friend are you?
Yeah.
So that's how I look at stuff. It's like, you know, I would be the one holding someone back and I don't even know them, you know, but it's like, you have to really kind of step back and evaluate, I think, what constitutes letting someone go or removing them from your inner circle, and what constitutes them being there in the first place. Not saying it's conditional, because I feel like when you care about people, you have to be more unconditional with how you approach them. Just like, you know, if you've got an individual who's struggling with mental health issues and they're one of your best friends, or they've got issues with their finances, or they blow them. Who knows? It could be any number of things. You have to really kind of evaluate, I can't just sit here and say I'm going to remove myself from the situation, because maybe you're not being the best friend by doing that. So you have to really articulate to yourself what exactly it is that is making you feel like you need to pull back. And is it something that you can help them with?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as much as, and we throw on the term best friend, right? This connection that sort of supersedes all others in a lot of ways.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the pain can come in when, something goes amiss. But even still with that level of friendship, that is a piece of a much larger puzzle for both people involved.
Right.
And so whether it's, someone's going through a breakup or divorce, or they're having financial stress, or they got fired from work, or whatever it may be, mental health issues, like you mentioned, they may go off the radar for a little bit and not be a great friend. And you could respond in kind and also not be a great friend, and step away. And in some instances, maybe that's the healthier option, is to step away. But I think, again, from an expectation standpoint, understanding that we're all human, not everyone can show up as their best selves or the best friend that they can be all the time.
Right.
And so, again, it muddies the waters a little bit, but giving them some space to mess up sometimes, as long as it's not a pattern, or again, anything that's hurting you to the point where you need to remove yourself. I think staying somewhat engaged in those situations, or again, just knowing that there may be other things going on with them to evaluate when you're making that decision.
Have you had that circumstance where you've made the decision to kind of remove yourself from a situation with a friend because you felt like it wasn't going to be safe for you, or it wasn't going to serve you?
I did. There have been different instances, different reasons kind of across the board. And I found, especially as I get older, that now if I start to retreat a little bit, stop picking up the phone goes both ways.
Right.
And that person also doesn't pick up the phone. And so in a lot of ways, that's kind of the answer I suppose I was looking for initially. And that's an easy, gentle way to back out of that situation. But lately, I guess in the last couple of years, those have been for a lot of the reasons that we've been talking about, just in terms of a misalignment,
right?
In terms of how I would behave, or the way that, they're speaking about other people, or those kinds of things. And it just sort of naturally fizzled out. In high school, when I went through that best friend breakup, is what I keep calling it, because that's what it was. And I will tell you, breaking up with a best friend hurts just as bad
much, I know,
as a romantic breakup. That kept me up at night for a long time. And I just realized that, it was unfortunate. Again, I think we were young, but there was a lot of her, I think, trying to make me smaller to make herself feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a really long time to figure that out. And I think it started out slowly in little comments, or, we'd be in a group and she would kind of throw me under the bus a little bit if she felt like I was getting too much attention. And I couldn't necessarily piece that together as it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on for several years. So it took me quite a while. And that ended up being an actual conversation, which is what I haven't had to do, luckily, for a long time. But just to say, this is not
kind of narcissistic. I never really realized till we're talking here that there can be actual narcissistic behaviors with female friendships.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately, there is often, and I don't know where this comes from necessarily, but inherently, there seems to be a lot of competition, and it can be subtle, but even with the people that you love, you both have sisters, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the genesis of all of this, we all know sister rivalry. I would take a bullet for my sister all day, every day. She's my favorite person on the planet, but I get a little jealous or competitive sometimes. And we're just sort of, I think as women, we can fall into those patterns if we're not careful.
Yeah.
So that's an easy one, I think, or a big red flag for me is when there's an air of competition or the need to kind of step over the other person to make yourself look better. If you're realizing that someone's doing that to you.
And as
That's hard
the
to recover
person
from.
who it's happening to, it's like, again, like I think Michelle was saying earlier, you can walk away from something and really kind of have to identify how you feel. And if you feel crappy every time that you're with
Yeah.
this person, maybe you're not with the right person,
Right.
if they're needing to do that. It's interesting because it's a nice segue, into really talking about how you develop your quote tribe. Like we've got like Michelle. It's funny because Michelle and I, along with Eileen, we spend a lot of time together. We hang out, we get along. We always have so much fun. And we have our little tribe trio, and as adults, this is kind of a fun thing for us, but it's, we're all single women too. So it's like if Michelle was married or if, Eileen was married or something like that, it would be a totally different dynamic because there would be a gentleman involved. There'd be a guy around or a husband or whatever, or boyfriend or whatever around. And Michelle has her sweetheart, but he doesn't live here. So she's kind of, I get to keep her,
But actually, that works out great.
I
for
know.
you.
I know.
I love that.
It works out great for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I kind of like it. But developing your tribe, it's like, how many people do you think it takes to really develop like that core inner circle? Do you think it's one person or two people? Or do you feel like it's necessary to have an identified group of individuals that are your closest friends?
Sometimes I see wedding parties and oh my gosh, there's like 10 bridesmaids. And I'm thinking, because in my mind, as an older, more mature person, if I were to do that, it's like I would have like 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they are my people.
Your peeps.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So the other thing too is, again, and I'm speaking purely from the spot that I'm in time, which I am just ready to raise the white flag about because it's becoming too much. Wedding season is here. The engagements, I can't.
How
But
many invites are you guys getting? It's like it's got to be bad.
absurd. Yeah, I mean, there are 4 weddings I can think of so far this year,
Okay.
which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. There's a lot happening. But
Especially the expectations weddings have nowadays.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Anyways,
it's
keep going.
crazy.
But yeah.
But and again, social media is a rabbit hole that we could go down, which we won't. So if I start to, please stop me. But in terms of what friendship is supposed to look like,
Right.
if you look at social media, again, especially at my age, you see, I had this exact same thought literally this morning about the bridal parties of 10 bridesmaids or, the Instagram photos from going out to a bar and you're with your 15 best girlfriends.
Yeah.
And to me, that just doesn't feel realistic. I mean, I commend anybody who's able to find the bandwidth to maintain
That's a
all
lot.
of those friendships.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot.
Yeah, because I'm the same way. If I were to get married, I would have a couple of people.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm trying to be okay with that. But the expectations for right now are still very much that way. But I'm also starting to see where things have turned. And Julie, to what you were saying too, about if there was a husband involved or kids or whatever, we're on the cusp of having all of our friends get married, have kids, move out of the city. And so all these people that you've built your life around and that you consider to be your tribe, all of a sudden
Their priorities are different.
their priorities are different. And you celebrate that, obviously. I mean, for the people, because this happened to me started a couple years ago. And so most of my close friends have moved out of state. I mean, they have babies, they're doing the whole thing. And a lot of the friends that I have now, which I'm super grateful for, I've kind of inherited from my boyfriend.
Yep.
Which is also an interesting dynamic in terms of finding your tribe when you're handed one, and what you do with that is interesting.
I mean, I imagine all of you guys have similar interests, just you're all the same age. You guys, I know because Andrew's tribe is hilarious because it's like this certain group of guys. I know who all of them are, but now they're all starting to pair up, get engaged, get married, and have babies. And I mean, they're at that place in their life. So he's kind of trying to figure out his tribe too. It's not that they're not friends, but they're not available.
Yeah. And so, again, what does your tribe mean or look like? I think trying to come to terms with the fact that that's fluid, and again, being okay with that. So the friends that you've had since college, if they do splinter and focus on other things, I mean, again, the love is still absolutely there. If they were to get back together in a room, I mean, in a heartbeat, you're immediately as connected as you were prior. But in terms of, I think for most of us, if we were to, which I would never recommend doing or would do myself, but like rank the people in my life in terms of who I feel closest to,
right?
Call it top 5, maybe. That is very subject to change,
sure,
all the time. And that's not a knock against any of those people.
Well, it's your family too. It's not just friendships. It's like your family friendships too. People that, you're stuck with for life, regardless.
Right.
It's like those people are in there and they may be closer at periods of time. And I go back to Michelle having that many sisters and stuff, I think is really cool, but it probably was a nightmare at times too. She's the baby, so she kind of had the benefit of, all of them making their mistakes and seeing what's going on ahead of her.
Yeah.
I made more than probably most of them.
Yeah, but you did it all in secret.
I was going to say, well, more mistakes with less consequences if I had to guess as an older child.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she was an angel.
But that, to your point, what you're talking about, that's when I lost touch with my very best friend we were friends since middle school, and is when I got married and started having children. And we lost touch with each other for a long time. And my tribe then was my husband and my kids. That was pretty much my tribe. And that's what kept my time going. That's what kept me busy and all the things. But when I reconnected with her, we had a lot to catch up on. But,
I'm sure.
Lots to catch up on. But it was like everything was still, as far as we went, the same, like you were talking about. And that's how we are now. I don't think you've ever met her, Julie, but so she's this like really great friend that I've had for such a long time.
In Eastern Washington.
Yeah. And
she's my friend now too, and I've never met her.
We don't talk a whole lot, but when we do and when we see each other, it's just like there's no judgment. We know we've got all of our things going on, separate from each other, and we just make the most of it when we can, when we have the time to.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, there's no magic number in terms of, you need these specific kinds of people in your life. I know, as much as I would love for this to be true as a shy person, you can't rely on any one singular person for everything.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot be your best friend, your therapist, your lover, if you're in a relationship. I mean, it's too many things going on. So being able to diversify out a little bit. I know for me, there are certain things or certain moments in my life where I really want that yes man. Like I want to go to my girl, and even if I'm making a terrible decision and I know that it's terrible, I still want her to tell me that I'm the best thing out there and to go for it. And she's never loved an idea more. That's great.
And what do you got to lose? I mean,
yeah, just do it.
I know I'm that.
I love
I'm
that for you. Yeah, but
I got you.
You need that person. And then I also like the girlfriend that I have that I set those expectations with in terms of being in large groups or whatever. One of the reasons why I love her is because she is so honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the point where, I mean, again, we've known each other since 5th grade, and in high school all the time I would come in wearing something and she'd be like, girl, what is that? I'm like, okay, I respect it. Thank you. I needed that. Or
well, she's not trying to put you down. She's just more like, we need to reevaluate.
Just like, I love you. And, your waist is not looking as cute as it could in those jeans. And that's fine. We're going to fix it.
Yeah.
But, so there are different people that fulfill different needs.
Yeah.
And trying to lump all that into anything more than a couple of people is tough.
I think like that scenario that you're talking about with the jeans, it's like, she's your friend when she says we can fix this, and she doesn't go tell the next woman, did you see the way Amelia came to school today? She looks like she's not doing that.
That's
she's
good
genuinely
distinction.
A friend.
Yeah, totally. And again, it's not to make herself feel better.
Right.
It's more just, again, out of love, and not necessarily just about fashion choices, obviously, but if I needed advice about work or a relationship, I know that she knows me on a deep level. She loves me. Whatever she says is coming from that place, even if I disagree with it maybe, but she's going to shoot it to me straight. And so if I'm not in a headspace where I can handle that, then I won't go to her because that's just going to hurt my feelings. So again, we have these different kinds of people that we should be able to lean on in an ideal world. I mean, I'm still trying to piece those things together. I'm saying that very confidently without having all those roles filled at the moment. We got some vacancies for anyone that's looking. But yeah, I think diversifying and having people that, lift you up in different ways is.
Have either of you seen the Netflix series Firefly Lane?
No, I've heard great things.
You have, Julie, right?
Yeah, I read the book too.
Yeah. Oh, you do. Oh, you read the book too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so great about a female best friendship. I won't say too much since you haven't seen it, Amelia.
Yeah, no spoilers.
But so true about, I thought of you and Mary a lot, actually.
Actually, Mary and I had watched it separately, and we both said, "Did you watch that?" Yeah. I was like, "You're totally Tully." That would be me. And then she's the responsible one, which I don't even know where that came from because I don't describe her. She's very responsible, but I don't think about her that way. I think about her being more goofy, but I'm more of the crazy one. Not batshit crazy, just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love the part where they separate their circumstances. Again, I won't say too much, but there's these circumstances that take place. And so one chooses to separate themselves from the other. And then she tries to find this fulfillment that same type of friendship that they had it was somebody else new, and it's just not the same. Nope. Like you start oversharing and talking like you would with your bestie, and they're looking at you like, okay, you're a little bit crazy. Like, why are you talking that way when there's no judgment or anything from your best friend? Yeah. So it's a really great series. Anyways, it just made me think of that.
Well, no, I think those
we're
types
talking
of friendships
about some of this stuff.
They're unique. Those are unique friendships. There's one client that we have, and we kind of got the client roundabout through, it was a referral through someone else. And anyway, long and the short of it is this woman has been married to this gentleman for, I don't know, 50 years or something. They're older than us. And she has her best friend from grade school, and they still are best friends.
Adorable.
Oh my gosh, they are so cute. And so one moved over to Bremerton area, and the other one's here, and they have sleepovers together. And it's just that unconditional love that they have. And it's interesting. I don't know why I thought of it, because you see that, and you don't really see that often, with people that are older, that have been around and they've maintained that friendship for 60 years. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to make it through so many iterations of the two of you.
Right.
Because you change a lot. You experience a lot of things. Your perspective or your priorities are shifting. And being able to hang on through all of that is really remarkable. But I mean, I've joked with my friend I was talking about earlier, who I've known for 28 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no one I'm more compatible with, who, I could get through things with any better, to the point where, I mean, she and I, going through our own dating things or whatever, but we were single at the same time for this little fleeting window, and, dating apps or whatever, it just wasn't going well. But we looked at each other and we're like, have we been in front of each other this whole time? Is this the solution? Do we need to
do we need to be lesbians?
Yeah. And I love you. I don't want to touch you, and that's fine. But like, let's just have this, super compatible companionate relationship and ride off into the sunset. And, I just, again,
bring your vibrator.
Yeah. Again, it down the hall. Sure. Don't come near me with any of that. But it's a bond like nothing else. And for those people that have it, I'm one of the lucky ones, I would say. But those are more difficult to find, I think. And it seems like, and I don't want to continue to bring it back to dating, but the same is true in dating. People seem to have a shorter attention span. There's always something else around the corner, something new and shiny and fun. And same is absolutely true of girlfriends. I see it all the time. So I don't know how you find those people, but I think when you do find it. It's a feeling that you have. And so if you do find it, hang on to it.
I was going to say, and then you got to hang on to it.
Yep.
I have a question for you, Julie.
Yeah.
In regard to, what you were just talking about in that female friendship that has lasted for 60 years. I totally see that with you and Mary.
Yeah.
But question is, did it ever become a problem between you and your husband? Was that third relationship, if you will, because it's a close one,
Sure,
and
yeah.
long-term
It's
one.
a great question.
Was it
Such a
ever a
good question.
problem?
No. They actually spent more time together than we did when we very first met, because I worked a different shift and Mary and Brian worked the same shift. So they hung out more than we did a lot of the time. So he knew her really well. I think as our relationship progressed, we'd been married for a long time. He knew she was my confidant, and that probably did create some issues, but she's always tried to be as neutral, I think, as she possibly could, because she loves him, and the kids are involved and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I think that does get in the way with people.
I would imagine that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I could totally
There's
see that.
another friend I had, a very close friend that I had when, Zoe was young, when she was a baby, actually. And we had chosen her to be Zoe's godmother. And she and I had a falling out because of my husband.
Okay.
And we never survived it. She chose to remove herself from my life and my family's life. It was obviously very serious because we were close friends, but I let her go.
Yeah.
I regret that to some degree now. I know where she is. I haven't reached out to her or anything like that, because I think she's a very final person, a wonderful person, but the circumstances as they were really tough. And she obviously made that decision with a tremendous amount of thought placed into it. And we won't get into the details, but Zoe's the one that probably suffered the most because she was her godmother and 86'd herself from Zoe's life. So
Right.
that it's interesting, because I think we talked about this in one of the episodes where I had a couple of different friends. They were more outer circle as opposed to like inner circle. I mean, they were friends, but not as close as my inner circle. But those friendships ran their course. I clearly was in a bad place, and it was when I was going through the divorce and all that kind of stuff. And they weren't the friends that were going to stick around and be there.
Yeah.
Which, in hindsight, at the time, I was thinking, gosh, that's really shitty. But now I look at it and I'm like, okay, I was fine for it. It didn't hurt me to not have them in my life one way or another. They were there with the intention originally for whatever they were there for, and then they moved on. So would I still be friends with them? Probably not.
So I guess I'm curious from your perspectives. There are these pretty consistent points in time, I think, where people experience these friendship fractures. And again, not in any glaring way, but just over time, the marriage, the kids, the whatever,
Right.
you start to move away from one another. And I think the kids component, from what I've talked about with my mom, because I was curious about her experience and the heartbreak that she went through, losing some of her friends who just frankly weren't interested in hanging out with a toddler at that point.
Yeah.
Because they were still wanting to go out to bars, and
Hang out.
nothing wrong with either of those two things, but they just didn't align. And so she went through a pretty massive transition in terms of befriending other moms and people that could relate to her circumstances. So that one seems obvious to me, probably because I'm heading into that territory right now. But are there other time points that you've noticed that have caused those kinds of shifts? Or is it more just a personality mismatch over the years that you've had where you've had to let somebody go?
I absolutely think there's pivotal times that have taken place. I can think of, Mary and I just had this conversation a couple of days ago, actually, about how I had been in a relationship that was not a really honest one. I didn't really realize that was the component that was missing. She saw it, though, plain as day. And in her efforts to try to talk with me about it, I would shut down. And when we were talking about this, she was telling me, she goes, I thought I was going to lose you. And I just looked at her. This is just like I said a couple of days ago, I just looked at her and I'm like, there's no fucking way you were going to lose me. But at the time, she probably thought so. And legitimately, I probably conveyed in some capacity that I didn't believe her and I thought she was creating problems or whatever the case may be. And her thing that she said, she goes, I just said to myself, I'm going to be there to catch her. So she knew what direction I was headed. I wasn't really ready to hear it yet. But boy, oh boy, when that reality hit, she was the first person I called, and the first person that I spoke to above everybody else. And no judgment. She knew. She wasn't trying to say, I told you so, or anything like that. It was more like she just was going to be there to have my back because she knew it was going to happen, at some point or another.
But she also didn't, it sounds like, rub it in your face along the way, or...
She tried to very gently say things, and she said, my defenses would go up. And I totally understand, but I just told her, if that ever happens again, just shake me and keep trying, just like I will with her. It's like, if she's running into any controversy, any capacity, I will be there to listen, and I will be there to be her advocate, and I'll be there to catch her. It's just, we're at that point in our lives where it's just kind of, that's the way it is. But it's always had to take time to get there. I mean, we really haven't had a lot of huge disagreements. I mean, I can think of maybe 2 or 3 in our entire friendship. And this was probably one of them. And then there was, we're talking high school here. We got in a fight in high school about something and didn't talk to each other for almost a year. Isn't it funny? I don't even remember what it was. Yeah. Well, she was dating some guy that was outside of school. And I honestly don't remember what the issue was. She got mad at me about something. I got mad at her about something. And then I'm very stubborn. Or apparently I was very stubborn. Yeah, at the time. Apparently more stubborn back then. Anyway, I digress. So yes, but I think my friendship with her is a real remarkable, very tender, it's just one of those things that it's really hard for me to describe. I feel very lucky that she's like my sister more than anything else. I would say she's like my sister.
Yeah. I mean, no one, whether it be romantic partner or otherwise, is probably ever going to know as much as that woman knows about you. Good, bad, and ugly.
There was a period of time though when I pulled back big time, because it was back around when I was getting married, so early 20s, and she had shared something with one of her brothers, I think it was, and it circled back to my fiance at the time, and I was really destroyed that she'd broken my confidence. And so after that period of time, there were a lot of things that I would just be kind of careful about. And I mean, we talked about it, so it was fine. Shit happens, right? We worked through it. But I've always been kind of curious about how much to share, with the people that are entrusted within your inner circle, and what not to share. Because when you think about I'll use my mom as an example, totally other generation, right? But we talked about this last week. She doesn't share anything with people besides my sister and I, really. No, her friends are all, and this is just the way it is. I think generationally, your mom probably is the same way, Michelle. They're very surface friendships. They talk about the weather. They talk about who knows what, but scrapbook. I don't know. They talk about other stuff. They chat about their grandkids, I'm sure, but they don't really get into the depth of things that are going on in your life, because she says that it's not for them to know. And I understand where she's coming from, but I disagree. But also am very mindful of what I share with who, because I know that the people that I am actually being, raw with are the ones that I would entrust with my life. I would entrust them with that information. And if that information was betrayed, I think I would be pretty devastated, So I'm careful about that. But like I said, I have my inner tribe. Michelle knows a hell of a lot more than, she probably wants to, and vice versa. We share a lot of stuff, but I think now it's so different. It just feels different, than it did when we were younger, where I was very cautious about who I would talk to about what, because I didn't want my thoughts to be shared with other people unless I chose for them to be.
Yeah.
And not everybody thinks that way.
I think I have the opposite problem.
Right.
I'm selective about who I let in, but I think for me, in terms of a bid for connection, I'll almost swing the other way in terms of oversharing as a way to either relate to somebody or try to get close. And typically it'll go both ways. I mean, we're both divulging things, and I'm still trying to figure out how to decipher what I should say and to whom, because you should have people in your life where you can say your innermost thoughts and they are going to love you no matter what, which I think is part of why girlfriend breakups are so painful.
I know.
Is because you have given them your whole mind, your whole heart. They know, again, like my friend of 28 years, she knows more and has seen more than any other romantic partner or anything else. My parents, even my sister, potentially, that she has with her. And if we were to separate, she gets to take all of that and go. And that's terrifying. But in terms of just sharing information in general, I've definitely shared with the wrong people. And it just seems like it's trial by fire every time. And I try to trust somebody, and then I'll say something, and then it either comes back around and I know not to do it again, or it doesn't, and then I can trust that person. But at some point, without trying to put your faith in that person, I don't know. I don't know how you suss that out.
Well, I think you have to be able to trust. What do you think, Michelle?
You do have to be able to trust, and you have to know your audience in a way. I know that seems like a weird term when it comes to friendships, but based on behaviors that you see some of those people have, that should be somewhat telling of what maybe you want to be sharing or not sharing. And that's typically with outer circle. Inner circle, that there's going to be pretty much, for the most part, and I can only think of my inner circle, y'all pretty much know everything about me. You know,
And we love her.
for the most part.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just time. I mean, by the time you get to the point where you can really say, this person is in my inner circle, then you've crossed that threshold. And, you know, maybe, I guess speaking for myself, I should be more careful until I get to that point.
I think too, as you get older, you come to a point where you don't really give a shit.
Yeah. I think Michelle calls it giving zero fucks.
Yeah. Give zero fucks.
We all should. I swear. I heard somebody the other day say, if women in their 20s could just give zero fucks, they would take over the entire world.
Thank you.
We're also insecure
Yeah.
and just are trying to figure it out. And by the time you get to that point, you know, lots of things have changed. But yeah, and insecurities as a 20-something is also going to lend itself to how your friendships go.
Exactly. And the people that you draw, you know, near to you.
Yep.
And I think, to your point, it's very different for us because we didn't have social media. We didn't have all of the things that correspond. And, you know, you see nowadays women that are, you know, in their 20s or 30s, and they're choosing a guy that they're dating or some, you know, whatever over their friends, or, you know, they're just not loyal to their friends in ways that, I mean, I've just noticed in different things. And of course, that's all through social media, but you know.
It seems so surface.
Yeah.
A lot of it seems so superficial and surface, unfortunately, because we position things just right. I mean, I use social media quite a bit, and we just put the good stuff.
Well, that's very true. You don't see the crap on social media.
Yeah.
There's, I know I'm not the first person to say this, but I can't credit it because I don't remember who did, but it was something to the effect of, don't compare your hustle to someone else's highlight reel.
Yeah.
Like, Instagram stories and posts are not indicative of what's going on in that person's life at all. And so to have that as the benchmark is tough. And I think logically we understand that it's not real.
Yeah.
But when you intake that content all day, every day, that line becomes really blurry. And it's hard to not then, you know, look at your partner, for instance, or your friends and be like, why are we not getting dressed up and taking photos? And
Or that she
you got
having the
FOMO
best
going on.
has
time.
10 bridesmaids and I have 2.
Right. And, you know, and silly things like that are not things that I just based on my personality would care about. But when you see it all the time, it's hard not to. But I am also curious in terms of prioritizing men potentially over your girlfriends, or, you know, as you enter the marriage and kids chapter of your life, or sometimes people then get divorced, you go through this period where you have these shared friends as a couple,
Right.
which is very different than the people that you would inherently gravitate towards on your own.
Right.
Or even if that's not the case and you do get divorced, then who gets the friends? Like, it seems like it only gets more complicated from
That's
here.
so funny that
Someone
you should
give
say
me some
that.
hope.
Yeah.
Well, no, the whole thing about getting divorced and who gets the friends. It's like, I know exactly what you're talking
Oh,
about.
I watched my parents go through it. 100%. There was a dividing line for most people, and which is not to discredit them, because I think
They're stuck in the middle.
to put that pressure on them to maintain that balance and not bring up the ex with the other person and try to keep things even Steven and spend the same amount of time with both. And I don't envy that position at all. So it kind of makes sense to me. But it does seem like approaching people in terms of friendship as a couple is different.
Oh, absolutely. You'll probably run into more of that when you have kids and they are in school, because I found that my friend groups changed. Like I had my friend groups in terms of the day-to-day was more involved with the parents of the kids that my kids were in school with. And that's how we got to know them. And we spent more time with them. And then I had my friend group from school or from work, that I was pretty close with too. So then as the kids got out of grade school and got into high school, that totally changed because they weren't friends with people in this. High school was totally different.
Yeah.
Grade school, you're more involved with what's going on. And as they get older, you're not spending as much time at the school. You're not volunteering as much. You're not doing a lot of the things that would get you in front of or involved with other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it does. I think it definitely does change because your priorities change as you're transitioning into one part of your life from another. But it's not to say that the friendships go away, but like you said, they're maybe on hold or you pick up where you left off. I mean, I have my dear friend MB that lives in Boise, and I haven't seen her in 2-3 years, but we connect with each other all the time, and she knows me. She was in my wedding. It's funny, you go back to the whole, who was in your wedding and who do you know now? I mean, the people that were in my wedding that I still see all the time or talk to all the time are my sister and Mary Beth and B. The other ones, they were friends, and they're, if I ran into them again, I would say hello, or whatever, but I don't spend time with them anymore. So they weren't the long-term friends that I thought they were going to be at the time that I asked them to be a part of this big event. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's not like they're bad people.
I think it's just life circumstances too, because I think about that. And my one really good friend in Eastern Washington, I didn't have her in my wedding. And we
have so many sisters.
I none of them.
None?
No. They were two of my friends, one of which I'm friends on Facebook now, but I haven't seen her. She was actually in the room with me when I had my first baby.
Wow.
So she was a really good friend, and she still is, but I haven't seen her in probably 30 years.
Oh my God.
Or longer. So we keep talking about trying to reconnect one of these days. She's in Montana somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm here, but I think some of that stuff is so not circumstantial, but circumstantial based on what's going on in your life at the time or what has been going on in your life, who you've been spending time with. Because I didn't really have a lot of friends. I mentioned that before. Yeah. Like during my marriage, I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. I really wasn't that outgoing, believe it or not, in that aspect.
I know. She was supposedly shy.
Not shy.
I just thought she was like this bougie girl with the perfect hair. I'm not kidding. When I first met her, I was just like, damn, this girl's got her shit together. And she was probably swirling around in her head as much as I was being a mom and trying to keep everything together. I just
really kept to myself a lot of the time because there were so many dynamics in the marriage. And I didn't really want to be social with many people because I didn't want them to be part of all that was going on.
Yeah.
So I just pretty much kept to myself.
I found that as things progressed, like after like having children and friendships that I had developed at that time, I started spending more time with my girlfriends than I did with my husband. And I think because we just weren't doing things together. And so then you start developing these friendships that you're going and doing those things with those people that you really probably, if theoretically, would want to do with your partner. But we had such different interests that they didn't really align. So I'm like, I'm not sitting home. I went and did my thing, But, you start living like a married single person. That way too. You're with your friends, you're spending time with your friends, but it's not like it's different, because you're married. I don't know.
Right. Which I know you were asking about this earlier, but I could see how that could, depending on the dynamic of the marriage, lead to conflict also.
Right.
From the husband potentially looking around and saying, okay, well, you've been out 3 times with so-and-so this week. Like, what's going on there? Why are you talking more to her than we're talking? Or
because they're way more fun than you, babe.
Yeah. Or because you never want to do anything, babe.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, I don't envy people, I guess, who are further along than I am, who have to juggle all those things. But I mean, friendships are definitely something you have to tend to. Also, you can't be passive and expect people to stick around unless you do have that relationship that's gone on for decades and you know they're always going to be there.
Yeah.
It can be easy to have them slip away if you're not careful.
Right. And or like Michelle was saying, you can pick up sometimes where you left off, depending on if you're in that same place in your life, because you might be not having kids, they might be having kids, your lives are completely separate right now. So spending time together is a very different dynamic. Whereas when you start being in that same stage of your life, it might feel different. You know, your friendship, you have different things to talk about. You have different things to be involved in together. That does change. So, yeah. So as we kind of start to wrap things up here.
Can we? There's a lot to wrap up.
We
in
have
this
so
one.
many
I
things. We want you
know.
to come back and chat again.
Oh my gosh, I would love to.
Yeah,
I
this
feel
has
like there
been
is
so
so
fun.
much more to dig into, but I'm glad we got to cover the ground we did.
Yeah. So walking away from this, do you think that there's things you'd like to share with other listeners that might be helpful, your age, our age, that, you know, might be relevant?
I mean, I think just in talking to the two of you, I had preconceived notions that age was going to be some sort of barrier in terms of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're all going through a lot of the same things. It might look a little bit different, but in terms of whether it's letting things or letting someone go or dealing with a conflict or trying to figure out your inner circle, it's all going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
People do come and go, and that's natural. And I think as long as you're being the best version of yourself, being the best friend that you can be, however that group looks is okay. And whether it's big or small or, you know, long-term friends or short-term, it's all whatever's meant to be will be from that standpoint.
The whole idea of just being your genuine self and what you bring to the table for the friendships that you have, whether they're fleeting, whether they're long-term or not, is, in my mind, what I'm taking away from this, because I can't control anything else that's going on besides what I do and how I behave and what I convey. And if I'm going to invest time in someone, I want them to know that I genuinely care about them. You know, and I don't have a lot of time to invest in a lot of people. So if I invest in you, you've got to be pretty special. That's how I look at it.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
So what do you think?
I just think that life is too short for ill will.
Mm-hmm.
And to your guys' both point of being your authentic self, you are who you are. And the ones that get you will love you no matter what. And when you find that one, like we've all got,
Mm-hmm.
just hang on to it.
Yep. Don't let it go, or don't discard it without really having some serious thought, because you might really regret letting that person go
Yeah.
Absolutely.
because you're mad or, you know, whatever. Well, I think that's all we have today. I think we'll probably pick this up at another time, but we so appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and share some of your thoughts. I've learned a little bit about you today.
Oh, good. I'm
Yeah.
glad. Thank you so much for having me. Again, this was so much fun, and hopefully I'll be back at some point.
Yeah, we'll find another topic that is interesting and go from there.
Here we go. Thanks for
Perfect.
listening, everybody.
Everybody have a wonderful day. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.